When I turned 40, the doctors told me I had liver cancer. My hubby dipped out with our savings. My sworn enemy, though, upon hearing about my diagnosis, went all out to help me secure treatment and stayed by my side until the very end. When I regained consciousness, I found myself back at my wedding at 20. The officiant was energetically declaring, "The groom may kiss the bride." I glanced over at my nemesis in the crowd, blonde hair, a cigarette dangling from his mouth, eyes locked on mine. Without warning, I charged toward him. "You want to kiss me?" He froze, dropping his cigarette and trying to play games. "No way, I don't buy that." I suddenly grabbed his collar. Amid gasps from the guests, I kissed him, reverting back to being 20. On my wedding day, my mom walked into my room. "Hey, Joy, the groom's crew is about to show up. You done with your makeup?" I checked myself in the mirror. Dark, full hair, bright and healthy skin, nothing like the pale, worn-out look after fighting a serious illness. "Why aren't you answering?" She frowned. I snapped and met her gaze. In my previous life, she was all about Tony's family influence. To get his dad to help my brother land a job, she pushed hard for me to marry Tony. Even when she knew he was a player, she kept it from me. After we tied the knot, when Tony cheated and turned violent, she told me to tolerate it. She even threatened to cut me off if I left him. "Almost done," I said. "I'll go entertain. Tony's family red envelope should cover everything." After she left, I sat by the mirror, slowly picking up a lipstick. A noise came from the window behind me. I turned around. A guy stood by the window, hands in his pockets, leaning against a tree, casually watching me with a roguish vibe. Seeing me, he was taken aback but quickly went back to his laid-back style. "Wow, all dolled up, huh?" My heart skipped a beat. Neil, my arch-rival, the guy who had stayed by my side till the end after my liver cancer diagnosis. Back then, I thought he was out to mess things up and told him to bounce. But now, seeing his face, 20 years younger, I was speechless. My mom barged back in. "Joy, you." She paused, noticing the guy at the window. "Neil, what are you doing out there? I'm telling you, if you mess up Joy's wedding, I'll come banging at your doorstep." With that, she slammed the window shut. "Neil, what are you doing out there? I'm warning you. If you ruin Joy's wedding, I'll yell at your house door." She shut the window and pulled me aside. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing. That troublemaker's been shady since he was a kid. His dad's in jail. He's a good-for-nothing thug. Stay away from him." I stayed quiet. She didn't know that this so-called thug later became a top entrepreneur. I looked out the window again, but he was gone. Firecrackers went off. The groom's crew had arrived. Mom grinned fake-like, and Jack, my brother, hurriedly shoved me into the car. They were eager to get me married off. Tony stood there, blocking the pranksters, looking shy and gentle, like a caring husband. Back then, his act tricked me into marrying him early, even dropping out of college on his urging, becoming a housewife, setting the stage for future heartbreak. In the bustling crowd, a girl in a white dress was staring hard at me. I dodged her gaze. As the bridal car started, I asked Tony, "Who's the girl in the white dress?" "Oh, just a classmate." "Are you tight?" "Nah, just classmates." I clutched my purse tightly. In my past life, I believed his excuse until that woman showed up with a kid, unraveling the lies I lived under. This scene replayed over the next 20 years, being escorted to the wedding venue, following the ceremony step by step, until the officiant triumphantly said, "The groom may kiss the bride." Tony, looking shy, approached me. "Joy." I stepped back. Tony froze. The crowd was stunned too. "Mom?" whispered urgently from behind. "What are you doing?" Jack, my brother, was flustered. "Be more proactive." I turned to face the audience. Among the sea of faces, Neil's yellow hair stood out, smoking with that rogue vibe. His eyes locked onto mine, intense. On my deathbed, in my past life, he looked at me the same way. I was a coward back then, scared I couldn't make you happy. If I could do it all over, I wouldn't watch you marry someone else. He climbed from the bottom, became successful, but never tied the knot. Only then did I realize he was waiting for me. Seeing me still, Jack nudged me forward. Tony reached out to steady me. "Joy, don't be shy." His smile barely hiding the monster. A serial cheater and abuser for the next 20 years. I pulled away from him, ignoring the puzzled crowd, rushed off the stage, and stopped in front of Neil. "You want to kiss me?" He froze, cigarette falling, messing with me. "No way, I don't buy it." I grabbed his collar suddenly, and to the crowd's gasps, I kissed him. The kiss started as a light touch. Neil's tense body seemed to relax, holding my waist and diving into the kiss, taking control. Mom reacted first, storming over, shouting, "Joy, what the hell are you doing? You're embarrassing us." She grabbed a bottle to hit me. "You disgrace, I'll show you." As the bottle flew, I instinctively closed my eyes. Neil leaned in to shield me. Jack grabbed my arm. "You damn bitch, making out with someone at the wedding." Neil quickly twisted his wrist. "Let go!" Jack yelped in pain and released me, and Neil immediately shielded me behind him. Tony stood on stage, looking hurt and betrayed. "Joy, why wasn't I good enough for you? I bought you the biggest diamond ring and threw the most lavish wedding. Why would you do this to me?" My parents chimed in, sobbing, "Joy, we treated you well. Why shame us like this?" The crowd started murmuring, looking at me with disgust or disdain, as if I were the villain being torn apart by everyone. Only that girl in the white dress was laughing. Neil tried to shield me from it all. I patted him, signaling him not to worry, stepped forward, and opened my purse, which I had been clutching. Some people, even the perpetrators, pretend to be innocent. I slowly pulled out a stack of letters. Tony was seeing someone else up to the wedding. These were his love letters to that person. The girl in the white dress froze for a moment, then smiled triumphantly. In a past life, she had given me these letters before the wedding. Letters Tony wrote to her. Back then, I confronted Tony with them, but he sweet-talked his way out. This time, I read them out loud for everyone to hear. "Since we parted yesterday, I miss you so much. Your voice, your scent, your body." The dirty, filthy words were out of place in such a setting, but I read them straight-faced. Tony lost his composure, his face twisted in anger. "Joy, you're lying through your teeth. What proof do you have that I wrote these letters?" I met his gaze and smiled slightly. He froze. He hadn't expected the woman trying to push me out would have such solid evidence. I pulled out a photo from the stack of letters. Seeing the image, everyone gasped. In the picture, Tony was holding a baby with a tender look. The background showed a hospital bed with a woman who had just given birth. The guests were in an uproar. Tony clearly panicked and glared daggers at the woman in the white dress. She was flustered too, not expecting me to reveal such damning evidence. Tony grabbed the mic from the host. "Don't listen to this crazy woman. These are photos of a friend who just gave birth. I was visiting her at the hospital. The kid's not mine." He didn't realize the old saying, "The more you explain, the less believable you are." I hadn't even accused him directly, yet he was in such a rush to explain. I expected he'd deny it, so I didn't waste my breath arguing. Instead, I handed the letters and photo to a nearby guest. People waiting for drama immediately crowded around. I looked at Neil. He understood instantly and took my hand. "Let's roll." I bolted. In my wedding dress with Neil, I left the ceremony hall. He held my hand, his cocky demeanor shifted to careful devotion, glancing at me like he was making sure he wasn't dreaming. Neil and I grew up as neighbors. His dad went to prison for theft when Neil was little, and his mom walked out on him too. He grew up relying on relatives' charity as a defense mechanism. I guess he was always fighting fiercely. Someone would insult him, and he'd beat them bloody. Adults called him a thug spawn and warned us to stay away. But for some reason, I was never scared of him. I often stood up for kids he bullied, and we became rivals. Then I married for love, and he left for business with no contact. Neil took me to a shop. The sign read, "Repairs and Sales." He pulled out keys and unlocked the door. Inside was filled with electronics and parts. "Is this your shop?" I asked. "Yeah." To outsiders, he seemed a slacker, but he had already set up a shop and was running a business. He looked back at me. "Want some water?" I nodded. He went to pour me a glass, his shoulder muscles flexing under his shirt. It reminded me of the kiss not long ago. Those big hands held me tight, solid and strong. My cheeks flushed, and I looked away. After drinking, Neil showed me to the second floor. There was a bedroom and bathroom, probably where he lived. He pulled out some clothes from the closet. "Might be hard to move around in a wedding dress. You can change into these while I go buy you something else, he said. "'Kay," I muttered, feeling a bit bashful. After a shower, Neil returned. His clothes were so big that the t-shirt looked like a dress on me. When he came back, he had 2 meals with him. He seemed surprised to see me, turning his gaze away, his ears slightly red. After eating, "It's dark outside. Get some sleep." "I'll crash downstairs," he said. I woke up in the middle of the night, went downstairs to find him not asleep yet, his cigarette glowing in the dark. "Neil?" I called softly. He flinched and quickly stubbed out a cigarette. "Why are you awake?" I gave a cheesy excuse. "I'm scared." Then he said, "I'll keep you company," and moved a chair to the bedroom. "I'll sit here." "You can sleep easy." It wasn't a great solution. I kept playing the damsel. "Could you lie down with me?" That single bed barely had room for both of us. Neil was clearly hesitant. "I'm really scared," he admitted, lying cautiously on the farthest side, keeping his distance from me. My fingertips touched him, and he suddenly sat up. I don't know where I got the nerve, but I looked at him pitifully. "Do you not like me?" In the moonlight, his face seemed to redden. "Don't talk nonsense." "Then what are you afraid of? What would a grown man be afraid of?" "Then kiss me." He stayed still, tense as could be. I remembered how in the past life, he liked others calling him brother. Throwing caution to the wind, I said softly, "Brother." He swiftly turned over, pinning me down. He cursed softly, grabbed my waist, and kissed me hard. The strong scent of male hormones hit me, and his solid muscles left me unable to move. Midway through, he raised his hand to unbutton his shirt. My cheeks flushed, and I awkwardly looked away. He suddenly laughed, stopped what he was doing. "Keep teasing me, and it won't just stop here." His voice was low. He returned to his side of the bed. I didn't dwell on it anymore. I slowly fell asleep. The next day, half asleep, I heard voices downstairs. Rubbing my eyes, I went down. "Neil, I brought the stuff you asked for." "Keep it down. Your sister-in-law isn't awake yet." I peeked out my head. "Morning, sis," a young boy called out. I was startled. "Go on, get out of here." Neil frowned and ushered him away. "I'll head out now," he said. After the boy left, Neil brought out breakfast from the kitchen, a plate of filled pastries and a bowl of soy milk, both still steaming. "Did you just buy these?" "No." He awkwardly looked away. "I made them." I was taken aback. Making pastries in the morning takes a lot of effort. I cautiously took a bite. The pastry was flaky with a savory, fragrant meat filling. "This is so good." Neil touched his nose, a bit embarrassed. After eating, I was ready to head back to school. In the past life, I didn't finish school because of marriage, which was always a regret. In this new life, I wouldn't let that happen again. Neil offered to drive me, but I declined. There's a bus that goes straight there from the entrance. He paused. "I'll pick you up tonight then." "Okay." As soon as I reached the school gate, I spotted Tony. Instinctively, I stepped back. He's here to get back at me. Memories of his domestic violence in the past life were vivid. With so many people around, he didn't act up, just acted calm. "Joy, let's talk," I frowned. "There's nothing to talk about." Tony didn't get angry and even smiled. "You sure?" I got a bad feeling. "I posted something interesting around your school." "What do you think it could be?" he said, looking confident. "If you go now, you might be in time." Anger flared, but I knew now wasn't the time to lash out. I left him and ran into the school alone. The campus was huge, and I didn't know where he had posted this so-called interesting thing. While I was chaotically searching, I saw a crowd gathered in front of the teaching building. Someone saw me. "Hey, isn't that her in the photo?" "Yeah, it's Joy from the math department." Lots of whispering, but they made way for me. I walked up slowly and looked up. In plain sight on the bulletin board of the busy teaching building was a photo of me. One was from the wedding yesterday, where Neil and I were kissing, and another, a nude photo. My fingers trembled. I ripped it down furiously. There was also a letter of complaint, but my mind was blank, unable to absorb any details. Just then, teachers from the administration rushed over. They removed everything, dispersed the crowd, and took me away from the scene. In the office, several teachers sat in front of me. The advisor poured me a cup of tea. Joy, we heard about yesterday. I stayed silent. Without a response from me, they exchanged looks. The content of the complaint letter, if it goes out, will hurt both you and the school's reputation. We'll suppress this, so don't think too much about it. Just go back to your classes. I was stunned. What did the complaint letter say? She pursed her lips. It's nothing. What exactly is it? A male teacher couldn't hold it in. You think it's all right for a young girl to be shameless and have it spelled out? Isn't it about how you messed around and left with someone else at the wedding? This city isn't big. News spreads fast. We knew even without the complaint. The complaint? For what? To report to the police? The male teacher got more upset. You weren't discreet yourself. Can you blame others for speaking the truth and wanting to call the police? Others? Do you know who that other is? It's my ex-fiancé. He cheated first and then filed a complaint against me for being indiscreet. Does that sound fair to you? The male teacher was dismissive. Chief Tony didn't make a fuss about how you slandered him at the wedding, and now you're backtracking. Chief James? Half my anger simmered down. How could I forget? Tony works at the Education Bureau. Of course, people in the system know each other. The advisor tried to calm me. Joy, it's all in the past. The school has handled the complaint, so don't stress over it. They were all desperately trying to protect the school's image and Tony. I gripped the nude photo tight. This was my last piece of evidence. Got it. I left the office calmly, as if the argument earlier never happened. I should have figured that Tony, given his nature, wouldn't let things rest after I broke off the wedding and exposed his affair. I got through the day under the whispers and strange looks of my classmates. By the end of the last class, I was emotionally and physically drained. Autumn was deep, with a cold breeze in the air. The street was dark, except for a lone flickering streetlight in the distance. Walking out of school, I spotted a familiar figure far off. Neil was leaning against a motorcycle, wearing a black bomber jacket. Seeing me, he nodded his head. I walked slowly to him, and he noticed something was up. Why the long face? I shook my head. It's nothing. He stared at me for a moment without asking further questions. Then he turned, got on his bike, and patted the back seat. Let's roll. I'll take you for a ride. I put on the helmet he handed me and sat on the back seat, unsure where to place my hands. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm and placed it around his waist. His voice vibrated low inside the helmet. Hold on tight. My heart skipped a beat, and my cheeks felt hot. As the bike roared to life, its swift speed made me instinctively hold on tighter. He had a firm waist with a warmth that felt almost scorching. He rode around the city and finally stopped on a bridge. The bridge was famous because of a local legend, and many couples came here for romantic meetups. I thought Neil was just going for the romance factor, but as we walked silently side by side for a while, he didn't say a word. I turned to look at him, about to speak, when I saw him awkwardly standing in front of me. Joy? I was taken aback. He rarely called me by my name. Did Tony tell him something too? What's wrong? He licked his lips and took something from his pocket. Then, suddenly, he knelt on one knee in front of me and slowly opened a box in his hands. It was a diamond ring. I was stunned. Joy. He repeated my name, each word sincere. Marry me. I didn't respond for a while, and he must have thought I was shocked. So he kept talking. If you're willing to leave the wedding for me, I'll never let you down. Maybe I can't give you a luxurious life now, but I promise, in the future, anything others have, you won't lack. And what they don't have, you'll have too. Kneeling there, he babbled on without seeming tired. It was touching for sure, but my mind was filled with Tony's accusations and that nude photo. I didn't know when the photo was taken, nor if Tony had more dirt on me. These were all ticking time bombs. So right now, I couldn't say yes. Neil, I called him softly. He looked up, usually so fearless, but now his eyes were full of nerves. I can't marry you right now. I breathed deeply. The night wind blew over the lake, chillingly cold. Those eyes, once bright, dimmed instantly. After a long pause, he asked, "Why?" This is my feud with Tony. I didn't want to drag Neil into it. I avoided a direct answer. Can you give me some time? He stared at me long and hard. All right, he finally replied. Maybe my family felt ashamed after I fled the wedding because they haven't contacted me since. Neil didn't seem bothered by my rejection either. When I said I wanted to stay at school, he blocked my way, trying to run. No, it's just more convenient at school, I said. He leaned over, pinning me against a wall, and lowered his voice. Joy, he murmured. My ears burned. We've hugged, kissed, even shared a bed. What's our relationship now? My face grew hotter, and I shook my head. Neil smirked with a mischievous charm. Engaged, he declared. You're my fiancé. In the end, I agreed to Neil's request. I'd stay at school during the week and stay with him on weekends. Rumors at school died down gradually. Occasionally, someone would point me out, but it barely affected my life. After all I'd been through, these were trivial. I just needed to focus, graduate, and pursue my dream of teaching, steering clear of being a dependent housewife. Meanwhile, I started recalling past events. In the previous life, Tony, aided by his family, became an education director at a young age. He was seen as high-ranking, cultured, a good husband and man. Until later, Lisa, the girl in white at the wedding, stormed in with a child. That's when people saw Tony's true colors. He had a child out of wedlock and continued cheating after marriage. I closed my eyes, trying to remember the chaos Lisa brought. I was so shocked and ashamed then, assuming she was there to threaten my position and forgetting why she actually came. I vaguely remembered her mentioning money and other women. Tony must have tired of her, cut off support for her and their son, and had other affairs by then. Lisa, having endured as a mistress for years, must have been desperate to confront him. The only way to reveal Tony's true self was to make Lisa see the truth. But getting a woman willing to be a mistress for love to expose him wasn't easy. Either way, it was still possible. I found out where Lisa worked at a clothing store and went there one Friday afternoon. She was startled to see me, but quickly regained composure and greeted me like any customer. You're Joy, here to buy clothes. I stared at her until her smile faded. Do you need something? Her tone grew impatient. Smiling, I said, I remember you attended my wedding. Aha, so you must have seen the photo I showed, right? She pressed her lips together. Yeah, for some reason. Though the woman in the photo only showed part of her face. I always felt she looked somewhat like Lisa. Lisa reacted like a cat on a hot tin roof. What are you talking about? Realizing she raised her voice, she looked around, then whispered, Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm working. If you don't need anything else, pardon me. After saying her piece, she turned away to attend to other customers. It seemed breaking through to her directly was going to be tough. Walking out of the mall as planned, I got on the bus heading back to Neil's place. The whole ride, I was plotting ways to counter Tony. But as I approached Neil's shop, there he was at the entrance, facing off with a group led by none other than my little brother Jack. He was shouting, Neil, you're nothing but trouble, seducing decent women, making them elope with you. You ruined my sister's reputation? Hearing something like that from Jack was weirdly amusing. I stepped forward. I left willingly. It has nothing to do with him. Seeing me, Jack rushed over, trying to grab my hand, but I sidestepped. He fumbled awkwardly, then continued. Sis, since you left, Mom and Dad have lost a lot of weight from worry. They are proud people, you know that. I'm here with a thick skin to ask you to come home and apologize. Just as I was marveling at Jack's sudden concern for the family, he switched gears. It'd be best if you also apologize to Tony. I see where this is going. I chuckled. Apologize, huh? Yeah, for what? Should I kneel and apologize for not being good enough? For failing to marry up? For not giving them a son-in-law in high places? Or for your lost job? Jack's face darkened instantly, but he held back. Sis, with what you did, everything at home is a mess. A mess? I don't know about that, but you losing your job definitely made you hate me, right? Sorry, I'm not buying this brotherly love act. He couldn't hold it anymore. Gritting his teeth, he swung a slap. Bitch! Instinctively, I closed my eyes, but then I heard a cry of pain. Jack had been kicked far away by Neil, left groaning on the ground. Adulterers! He cursed, signaling his posse to attack. Neil's glare kept them at bay. Jack barked again for them to move, but only one hesitantly stepped forward with a bat, which Neil quickly disarmed, causing the guy to yelp in pain and send the bat rolling away. No one else dared to make a move. "Jack!" he howled, but his crew didn't budge. Giving up on ordering them around, he picked up a nearby bucket and hurled its contents toward us. Neil was quick, pulling me aside, but not quick enough. The red paint hit him like blood dripping down, while I was untouched, except for a single splash on my forehead. Neil turned to see the speck on my forehead, his previous calm now laced with quiet fury. He moved slowly forward, picking up the bat, walking toward them, looking like a vengeful specter in his paint-stained clothes. I had seen him lose it before, and my gut told me trouble was brewing. I quickly tugged his sleeve. "Neil." He snapped back to the present, looked down at me, his harsh expression softening slightly. "It's okay. Don't be scared." Jack, unaware of his narrow escape from calamity, kept yelling insults. Neil's intense glare finally shut him up, and Jack eventually left with his group, spitting profanities as they went. Once they left, I realized my hand had been clutching Neil's sleeve, damp with sweat. Just a bit more, and he would have attacked them. I let go, hearing him say, "I'm sorry." Confused, I asked, "Why are you apologizing?" "I should be the one apologizing for upending your life and causing all this trouble," he said, gently wiping the paint from my forehead. "I didn't protect you. I'm sorry." His apology caught me off guard. He was drenched in paint, but only worried about the little spot on my forehead. I had never been treated with such consideration. Growing up, my parents favored Jack. I married the wrong guy in haste and wasted my life between my family and marriage. Only near the end of my life did someone hold my hand and speak of my importance to them. Now here he was, right in front of me. I blinked away the moisture in my eyes and hugged him, comforted by his familiar scent. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Sorry I didn't see your love before. Sorry for just now realizing that what I feel for you isn't gratitude or repayment, but love." Neil stiffened momentarily, then hugged me back. "I love you too." Later, Neil changed clothes, took a shower, and we went out for dinner. That night, when it came time to sleep, I felt a bit nervous, wondering if anything might happen. I opened the bedroom door to find another bed. What used to be a single bedroom looked like a double with one bed on each end of the room. Neil caught my surprise and resumed his easy demeanor. "What? Dreaming we'd share a bed?" My cheeks warmed instantly. He dropped a hand on my head, ruffling my hair. "Don't worry, I'm yours sooner or later." Flushed, I pushed him away, hurrying to bed. Exhaustion quickly took me to sleep. Half asleep, I heard some noises from downstairs and jolted awake. I quietly called for Neil but got no response. His bed was empty in the faint moonlight. Maybe he went to the bathroom. Not knowing where the hall light was, I stumbled toward the sound downstairs. The room was dark except for the glimmer of a tiny red light from the couch near the studio. I sighed in relief. "Neil?" Hearing my voice, he quickly stubbed out his cigarette and turned on the small lamp next to him. In the dim light, I saw dried blood on the corner of his mouth. I thought I was seeing things, so I stepped closer. It wasn't just his mouth. His brow and the side of his ear were also covered with bruises. "You went fighting." He stared down at the cigarette, but stayed silent. "Did you fight, Jack?" He took a deep breath, leaned back on the sofa, and looked at me. "Yeah, I was kind of upset, but I tried my best to hold it in." "Why didn't you tell me?" He didn't answer. There are always those aimless high school kids around Jack. Young people don't know their own strength. What if they hurt you? And it's just you. Even if you can fight like crazy, what if 10 or 20 of them come at you? How will you get away? Neil put another cigarette between his lips and reached for the lighter. He paused, then stopped. "I'm sorry, I overreacted. I just want you to be honest with me. If something's going on, we can figure it out together." The room went quiet for a few seconds. Neil suddenly spoke. "I was thinking the same thing." I was taken aback. He slowly lifted his head. His dark pupils seemed even deeper in the soft yellow light. "So, if something's happening at school, can you tell me?" For some reason, at that moment, I felt like my wandering soul, like a drifting dandelion, had just found a place to belong. An indescribable sense of peace and belonging wrapped around me tightly. I felt a pang in my nose and quickly looked down, but the tears wouldn't stop. In this new life, I didn't cry when my parents pushed me to the edge, when Tony plastered my nude photos everywhere, or when a teacher at school insulted me. But now, I cried. Neil, like a child who just realized he messed up, he jumped off the sofa, the cigarette in his mouth, falling somewhere. It's all my fault, please don't cry. What could have possibly happened to make you so upset? Can you tell me? The moment he called me wife, I forgot about my tears. I half angrily pushed him away. What are you even saying? But he pulled me back with a sly grin. Why worry? You'll hear it eventually. I nestled in his arms, my heart warming up. Just as I was about to tell him the truth, I hesitated. If I showed him the nude photo, would it cause a rift between us? Would he think I was actually the kind of loose woman I was rumored to be? But I had to face it now. I took Neil to the bedroom, slowly took out the crumpled photo, and told him everything from start to finish. He listened through clenched teeth, his eyes bloodshot. I was scared he'd do something rash. He listened through clenched teeth, his eyes bloodshot. I was scared he'd do something rash, so I held his hand. I'll deal with Tony, but not just by beating him up. I have my own plans, trust me. And also, I paused. If it bothers you, tell me. I'm not one to cling. Neil was stunned. What do you mean? His serious tone startled me. Just joy. He said my name clearly. All this photo means is that you're the victim, nothing else. The moment Neil chooses someone, he's in it for life. My heart warmed instantly. I tried to say something, but found myself too choked up to speak. Neil gently held me by the shoulders, calming my emotions. What do you think about the photo now? First, I know I wasn't thinking clearly when it was taken. Second, the background only shows some bed sheets. Given the dim lighting, I can't tell the color clearly, but it seems light blue. A revelation sparked. It must be Jack. Neil listened. I've only been staying in one place this entire time, and I happen to have light blue sheets, just like in the photo. It must have been taken in my room, on my bed, while I was sleeping. No one else but Jack could have done it. Neil paused for a few seconds. I'll get to the bottom of it. You focus on what you need to do. Don't worry. I won't do anything stupid or impulsive. I'll make sure the bad guys get their due. He then gave me a light kiss on the forehead. So tonight, have a good dream. From that day on, I put the photo incident aside. Whenever I had time, I'd wander around the mall where Lisa worked. Neil had told me before that Lisa's dad was a major gambler. Her family struggled financially, so after she had her kid, she relied on her meager salary and the money Tony gave. One day I saw her father bothering her outside the mall. Lisa, did you get your paycheck yet? What does it matter? I told you not to bother me at work. If my boss sees, they'll cut my pay again. Lisa, I owe people money, and it's been a while. They said they'll break my legs if I don't pay up. Could you help this one last time, please? The old man cried and yelled, catching the attention of passers-by. Lisa clearly wanted to avoid it and seemed deflated. How much do you owe? Hearing that, the old man stopped yelling. Not much, just $2,000. $2,000's not a small amount these days, and this old man acts like it's nothing. He must lose a lot gambling. I haven't gotten my paycheck yet. I'll give it to you at the end of the month. Can you at least talk to your boss too? I said I don't have a cent. The old man clammed up quickly. After dealing with the mess, Lisa looked exhausted as she went back inside. While the old man wandered off singing, I suddenly got an idea. I went to a nearby phone booth and called Neil. You mentioned before that Lisa's dad's a major gambler. Yeah, why? Can you find someone to play with him? I lowered my voice slightly. Play it big. Neil understood right away and chuckled lightly. You have plenty of tricks up your sleeve, huh? But I like it. My cheeks flushed. He was still the same laid-back guy, even flirting with me over the phone. After hanging up, I went back to class as usual. I understood some things just need time, like blowing up a balloon, waiting for it to grow until it hits its limit, and then it bursts. Before that, everyone thought life was calm, including Tony. It had been a while since the whistleblower incident. He seemed to want to see how miserable I'd become. So he picked a time to corner me at the entrance of the school building. Hey, you've fallen this far and still haven't dropped out. You don't know what your classmates say behind your back, do you? Or are you just pretending not to hear? I quietly looked at him. Do you need something? Just came to see my ex-fiance, and by the way, tell how I'm getting married again. The new bride is the chief's daughter. Her body, looks, family background, all 1,000 times better than you. He sounded humiliating, with disdain in his eyes. Also, Jack, don't actually think that escaping from me didn't have a price. This is just the beginning. I'll ruin you completely. Is that so? I wasn't fazed at all. You don't really think I'm scared, do you, Tony? People do things, and heaven sees everything. You're not seriously thinking you can get away with everything you've done, right? I walked over slowly, patting his shoulder. You're getting married, man. Keep it low-key. You wouldn't want something messing up your wedding and ruining you? Who knows, that could be you. He jerked away from my hand. Don't touch me? I scoffed, and right in front of him, cleaned my fingers one by one. Pretty dirty. His face turned livid, cheeks trembling. The crowded front of the teaching building, which he chose to humiliate me, turned into his biggest obstacle to losing control. I chuckled, walking away without looking back. Yeah, just like he said, the real show is just beginning. After about 2 weeks, I went to where Lisa worked again. From a distance, she looked thinner, her complexion sallow. Dark circles, heavy. It seemed the old man hadn't stopped asking her for money, probably because last time, I hinted at Tony with threats. From what I noticed, he seemed to have really backed off from her. Not sure if the monthly allowance made it to her on time this time. I walked over with a smile. Seeing me, her face changed dramatically. What do you want? I got straight to the point. I know you're strapped for cash now. She paused. Your dad's a leech, always asking you for money. You can't ignore him because you've got a little one needing his mom. And recently, that irresponsible man even stopped sending you money. She trembled all over. What are you trying to say? I stepped closer, looking into her eyes. Lisa, don't you get it? All your bad luck starts with that guy. You know why he hasn't contacted you? Because next week, he's getting married to the chief's daughter. So, are you still dreaming he'll look back at you or your son? She collapsed to the ground, clutching her chest, shaking her head, muttering, It's impossible. I knelt beside her, holding her hand tightly. Actually, I didn't call off the wedding because of the evidence you gave me. She looked at me confused. It's because I know over the years, besides you, he had many other women. That was the final blow. Lisa completely broke down. I think she had realized Tony's true nature long ago, but kept denying it because of love, because of her son. Now someone laid it all out in front of her. She couldn't keep lying to herself. Walking out of the mall, I felt like I could finally exhale. If things played out like before, Lisa would cause a scene with her kid, likely choosing the wedding day. But nothing set in stone. Doesn't matter, though. I have other plans. I'll make sure the jerk falls into ruin. Tony's wedding came around fast. That day, I took the day off to attend. Not long ago, I escaped from here. And now everything was happening again. But it was someone else jumping into the fire. The wedding was bustling, with a lot of familiar faces from last time. I found a seat, wearing a hat and mask, avoiding anyone's recognition. As the ceremony started, I watched the bride and groom step onto the stage, go through the motions, kiss, exchange rings. Tony was still nauseatingly fake. Even as they got off stage to toast, Lisa hadn't shown up. Maybe in the end, she was still trapped by love. Just as I was about to leave and start my next move, the door slammed open violently. The loud noise drew all eyes from the guests. There she was, Lisa, standing at the door. In her arms, a wailing little boy. Tony's face changed drastically. He didn't even notice the wine glass he was holding, hurrying toward Lisa. But as he passed me, I stuck out my foot. He didn't see it coming and fell flat on his face. Tony, you bastard, you deserter, leaving me and our son to marry someone else. How can you live with yourself? Aren't you afraid of karma? Lisa's voice was loud, making sure everyone heard clearly. In my previous life, she made an entrance just like this in front of me. The venue was silent for a few seconds, then erupted. Everyone rushed to the spectacle, quickly surrounding Lisa and Tony. Who are you? I don't know you. Tony stumbled up from the ground, not caring who tripped him, lunging forward, trying to drag Lisa away. The tugging only made the child cry harder. An onlooker got between them. "Let's talk this out. No need to get rough. Don't want the kid to get hurt." Tony's face had turned a deep shade of purple by now. The bride behind him couldn't stand the humiliation anymore and turned to leave. He quickly rushed over to her, grabbing her arm. "Don't listen to that crazy woman." "I don't even know her. She's trying to ruin my reputation." But Lisa just sneered, raising her voice louder. "Tony, did you really think that after all this time together, I wouldn't have any evidence? Let me tell you, the camera you got me, I've used it to take pictures of us in bed, just in case you ever tried to deny and call me crazy." She hugged her child with one arm and pulled out a stack of photos from her pocket, flinging them to the ground. Within seconds, they were picked up and passed around by the crowd. The bride slammed her high heel into Tony's foot and stormed off, leaving him shouting in pain. Lisa wasn't satisfied, just talking to Tony, and turned to address the guests. "Remember Joy, who ran away from her wedding with Tony over a month ago? She accused him of cheating, and I gave her the evidence. Do you all know why she caused such a scene? Because this jerk—" Lisa pointed at Tony with anger. "He's played with more than one woman's feelings. There's a mistress, and another one, and even more." Tony was speechless, collapsing to the ground. Tony's parents finally arrived. They ordered someone to take Lisa out. But a bystander shouted, "Your son messed up. Why bully a single mom and her child?" Several others chimed in, backing them up. Realizing they couldn't resolve the situation, Tony's father turned and slapped him hard enough to skew his face to the side. "It's my fault for not raising him right. This is a family matter. Please don't discuss or spread it. Thank you." As he was about to drag Tony away, an enraged middle-aged man arrived, kicked Tony twice without a word, and then repeatedly pummeled him until Tony was pleading on his knees. No one, not even his parents, dared stop him. The man was the bride's father and Tony's boss. I watched all of this unfold, coldly smiling. Every drama comes to an end. With the bride leaving and Lisa taken away by the cops, things seemed to return to normal. I took off my mask and hat, slowly walking over to Tony. I looked at the man I had lived with for 20 years in a past life, feeling only unfamiliarity and disdain. As soon as he saw me, he dropped the cup he was holding. It shattered all over the floor. "This was all you." I smiled, holding a wedding gift for him. "Like it." He roared like a beast, forgetting about maintaining a polite demeanor, and raised his hand to hit me. I dodged just in time. He was stunned. It's ironic. During 20 years of living with him, the only skill I learned was dodging his fists. "There are police outside. Are you sure you want to hit me?" He regained his composure and stopped. "Tony, do you know where you went wrong?" He looked at me in confusion. I continued, "You failed by being two-faced, pretending to be someone you're not, greedy and lustful, with no sense of responsibility. Your life is like a rotten tree, rotten to the core. It's only a matter of time before it falls." I just sped up the process, tilting my head. I smiled, "Good luck." With that, I left the chaotic wedding scene without looking back, like shedding 20 years of despair and pain. The news of Tony's mistress ruining the wedding and the bride leaving spread quickly. It even made the front page of the local news. Now everyone knew he was a womanizing jerk. Meanwhile, with Neil by my side, I took that indecent photo and reported it to the police station. According to Neil's investigation, after Jack took those photos of me, he got a high schooler to bring the camera to a photo shop downtown to get them developed. The kid, not mature enough, confessed everything under Neil's pressure. We contacted the Photoshop owner. Since these were explicit photos, he remembered them distinctly and agreed to testify. The police immediately went to collect evidence. Seeing a bunch of officers, my parents were shocked. When they spotted me with Neil outside the door, they burst into a tirade. "What, you think just because you bring the cops, you can come back home after running away? Let me tell you, as long as we're alive, you won't set foot in this house. Such disgrace. Why haven't you just died out there?" Their insults became harder to hear even for the police. "Please do not interfere with our investigation." My parents changed their tone instantly. "Officer, what's going on?" The police didn't answer straight away and instead asked, "Which room does Jack sleep in?" My mom pointed it out, but continued to press for answers. The police, withholding any information, closed the door and began their search. She glared at me with anger. What trouble did you bring this time, you little wretch? Neil tightened his grip on my hand, clearly holding back his anger, but I was calm. Just wait. You'll soon find out. Originally, I thought once the police found the camera and film, they'd have enough to charge Jack, but for some reason, they searched inside for over an hour. Eventually, they emerged with 2 large boxes full of recorded discs. My mom, sensing no good would come out of this, wailed and tried to block the police from taking those items. I'm warning you, touch me again, and it's assaulting an officer. Mom got so scared she stopped crying. When the cop came up to me, I whispered, "What's all this?" We thought this kid was messed up for taking nude photos of his own sister, but he's also making porn videos, starring himself. We need to check if there are any girls drugged in there once we get back. I froze and then asked, could he have caught wind and run? Don't worry, we already have people on him. He'll be caught within half an hour. Great, thank you for your hard work. After the police left, Mom collapsed on the floor, crying hysterically and cursing at me. They must have heard what the officer said too. Dad, usually the quiet one, spoke softly. Joy, you brought the police here. Can't you do something? He's your brother, your own brother. He never spoke to me so nicely before. But at that moment, for the sake of his so-called son, he's willing to swallow his pride. I even thought if he could exchange his life to keep his son out of jail, he'd do it without hesitation. That's not my brother, I chuckled, just a beast. He looked shocked, but I kept on smiling. So why plead for a beast? After that, he showed no more kindness. He joined Mom cursing and hating me, but I was used to it all, didn't care at all. After all, without their precious son, the rest of their lives would be full of pain and despair, right? When I left, Neil held my hand tight. I thought he was worried about me, so I said, "Don't worry." But he shook his head and looked at me, eyes no longer carefree, now filled with firm love. "I just think you're stronger than I imagined," he said. "Really, but sometimes I feel pretty weak." He laughed. "No worries. I'll always be here to protect that weak you." Not the most romantic line, but it made me feel secure and sounded nice, like his large, calloused hands holding mine, strong and reassuring. After we got back that day, Neil proposed to me again. This time, I accepted. When the ring slipped onto my finger, I'd never thought diamonds were that beautiful, but at that moment, it shone brilliantly. The next day, Neil tugged me to get our marriage certificate. I stopped. No household registration booklet. He pulled one from a drawer and tossed it on the table. See what this is? It was my household registration booklet. Where'd you get this? Doesn't matter. Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. I suddenly remembered one morning, right after I started staying with him, when one of his guys sneakily brought something over. Could it have been this? You had someone help you steal it? How is it stealing? It's called taking. And it was returned right after. I laughed silently, grabbing his outstretched hand. So back then, you'd already planned on marrying me. I suddenly thought of another life, sitting in the hospital, kneeling by my bedside, reminiscing our past. He told me how he fell for me, never daring to speak up, and how he watched me marry someone else. A short life full of regrets. But now, this regret was put to rest as we picked up that red booklet. I remembered the first time I saw him as a kid, sitting on a pile of stones, his small frame standing out. I asked him what he was doing. He said he was waiting for his mom. I sat with him watching the sunset. Before leaving, he asked, "Will you keep me company tomorrow?" I nodded. "Sure." "Will you stay with me always?" I hesitated but nodded again. "Sure." Later on, I heard Tony's reputation in the city got ruined for good. He lost his job, stayed home all day. Then someone saw him looking disheveled, snatching candy from kids like he'd gone insane. But that's just hearsay. I stopped asking about him. As for Jack, he got over 10 years for rape and distributing obscene materials. I wonder if his loving parents will still be around when he gets out. The following year, I graduated smoothly. Neil's store was doing pretty well. He even hired a few more people, but he seemed to have something else on his mind, looking preoccupied. One night, he finally told me, "Joy, I want to head south. I think there's a bigger world there." Sure enough, even marrying him in this life, he still longed for the South for his career. But like before, if you want to go, I'll go with you. No matter where, I'll always stay with you. Soon after, we transferred the store to someone else, and with our savings and a few belongings, boarded a train heading south. The night was dark. The train chugged through the thick fog, rumbling around us. "Are you scared?" Neil asked. I leaned slightly on his shoulder. I knew the future would have many challenges. New life isn't easy, but next to Neil, I always felt safe. As dawn broke, I glanced at the man beside me and smiled. Not scared.